I'm interested in what percentage of the market is still behind disk controllers, and what other configurations you're seeing, and where that percentage is going.
In data store, it's 100%. Every USB flash drive has a hardware controller. Every flash memory card has that controller. Every embedded flash in every phone has a controller, hardware controller. Every SSD has a very sophisticated controller. You cannot operate flash memory in a data storage environment without a dedicated hardware controller that keeps track through its firmware of all the changes that happen as you go from one generation to the next. There's no way you could go faster than Moore's law scaling without that controller. That was very easy, not easy, but it through firmware in that controller that you could adapt, to all. Every generation was more challenging, more infringing fields, more.
But are new ones looking like DRAM arrays instead of like disk drives, or are they still emulating disk drives?
They're still emulating disk drive, but they're changing.
Yeah, the image on the screen shows it. You got a controller, you got the flash memory, you got firmware. You need that, period. So it's the sophistication of that firmware that allows all the different capabilities. What's that again?
That wasn't my question.
Well, you said, is there another way?
No, my question was, how much of them are still emulating disk drives versus emulating other sorts of memory arrays? All of them.
It's
Yeah.
like 100%.
100%.
Isn't there secret sauce?
No,
that
actually,
allows-
so PCIe is not,
But it's
it's still serial, but it's a controller. I guess his question is, ATA, PCIe is not a traditional.
Right, so there is NVMe, which is putting it directly on the bus.
what interface you have to deal with a host can vary all the time. Of course, a USB interface is not the same as a camera interface or an ATA or PCI Express. But the heart of the core of the controller is to manage flash, to translate commands from the host transparently so that you can use anybody's flash memory in that device, and it's a plug and play.
But it is true that while you still need a controller, PCI Express, PCIe bus is putting flash directly accessible by the host processor. So you're getting rid of that baggage, because frankly it is baggage. And actually what that ends up bringing you to is kind of the holy grail, like when is it all just going to be, why do you have this external storage? Well, it's a cost kind of a thing. But when is cost going to be such that you can have all your memory directly accessible by the processor? There's still going to be a controller doing the magic underneath, but the holy grail is getting away from that disk drive controller, getting away from the ATA interface and all those commands. It's emulating memory,
Yeah, it's
directly accessible memory. So that is the change. Right, exactly. So that is the important change. It's
Yes,
a very
so
fundamental change that's happening right now.
one other thing that's happening that's very good, but it's really only the last few years, is that the operating systems are now becoming flash aware. They kind of ignored all the issues that flash had, and the software basically said, I'm talking to a disk drive, a slow disk drive, and now they're beginning to see that that's not a winning proposition, because you can get so much more performance than going through this serial interface.
Also, one of the things, there's a command called trim, because if you think about it, if you're whenever you delete a file, all you do is typically change the header. You don't actually remove sectors. But there's a trim command that will intelligently tell the controller, but the processor can tell the controller on the device, hey, there's a bunch of sectors that are no longer in use. You don't know it, but now you know it, so you can, you don't have to keep track of those anymore. So that's a very important thing. So the file system stays in sync with the use of the flash cells.
So when flash moves on the motherboard, right next to the CPU, that's the new era for new flash architecture. It will no longer be in servitude to the hard disk drive architecture that got us to where we are, but really, it's done.